speaking. Hi, Kate here, and if you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. Helps me build the channel. Okay, something been going on, which I think hasn't been getting the publicity it deserves. The Israeli Zionist assault on Palestinian children. Uh, it's totally horrific, and some of the content will be a bit disturbing. I won't have graphic photos, but the content itself is disturbing. But something which is happening in our world, which we should be very much aware of, especially people on the left. Okay, well, the Israeli assault on Gaza, bombing of Gaza. Gaza has over 2 million people, like 2.2 million people, in an area twice the size of New York City's Central Park. It's like the third most densely populated place on the planet. And it's pretty much guaranteed half the population are under 18 are children. So, and there are no bomb shelters in Gaza, like the IDF, the Israelis do not allow materials for building it. So there are no bomb shelters in Gaza. So very hard to find a safe place to hide. So it's pretty much guaranteed whenever the IDF bombs Gaza, supposedly in retaliation for Hamas attack, which is much smaller, they're guaranteed to kill, injure, children. It's really horrific. And the New York Times, of all people, of all places, recently or a few weeks ago, actually had on their front cover the pictures and names of 50 children who were killed in Gaza, which shows a shift in the narrative, which is a good thing, although it still has a ways to go. And of course, the New York Times got pushback from Zionists. Anyway, in addition to that, basic casualties of war. It is specific IDF policy to target children. On 2018, there was a Palestinian protest movement, the March of Return. Like Palestinians who were the original indigenous inhabitants of Palestine were pushed into the West Bank or Gaza, which is the world's largest open air prison camp, and they can't return. They can't go back to their home city, home village. Well, Jewish people can, who never been to Israel, they can go there and automatically become citizens. So there was a protest movement started in March of 2018, went on for about 8 months after that. Uh, the IDF shot them. They were gunned down. There were massacres. I believe on the first day, something like 18 people were killed, and a total of 30 Palestinians altogether were killed by the IDF. 1,600 people were wounded, and wounded means possibly blinded, maimed for life. It was really horrible. 4 children were killed. So these children were no threat to the IDF. IDF soldiers were heavily armed, wore body armor. There were no children, were no conceivable threat to them at all. They were meters away from the boundary wall. So, also around that time, as an interview, and his high-ranking Israeli military leader actually openly said that stated IDF policy is to target children. There's the Electric Intifada, which is an online Palestinian journal. It's great to read, to follow what's happening. They're headquartered in Detroit. Editor is Ali Abunimah. Anyway, he said in a 2018 article, he quoted an interviewer, Brigadier General Zavav Fogel. He had been retired. He was in the reserves. He had been the commander of the IDF Southern Command, which encompasses Gaza. Anyway, in a radio interview with an Israeli public radio station, he said it was stated IDF policy to identify and target small people, like people who are non-adults, i.e. children. It was stated IDF policy to do this. It was really horrible. I'll share the link for the interview. It was in Hebrew, but Ali Abunimah has a translation in English you can read. Really horrific. And Ali Abunimah said in his article that this could be used as his public statement could be used as declaration of intent before the International Criminal Court on accusation of war crimes or crimes against humanity. It's hard evidence right there. Anyway, the ICC did accuse Israel of war crimes. Of course, the U.S. does not recognize the ICC. Trump actually said if an ICC member comes to the U.S., they'll be arrested. So the U.S. is a gangster state and totally supports Israel. Okay, so the other sources quoted the interview with Brigadier General Vogel as well. Also, throughout this video, I'm gonna have pictures like memes of Palestinian children who were killed. The pictures won't be graphic, but just in memory of them. Okay, so in an article in August 2018 by Whitney Webb, article in Mint Press, she says in 2018, throughout the year up to that time, the IDF killed at least 35 children, 30 in Gaza, 5 in the West Bank, making 2018 a record year. 2016 was the previous record year for 2018 was a record year for child fatalities. The previous record was set in 2016 when the IDF killed 32 children, most in the West Bank, and altogether throughout 1,467 children were hospitalized due to mostly bullet wounds or tear gas inhalation throughout that year. And the Israeli the Israeli she goes on to say, the Israeli state keeps a huge number of Palestinian children in detention. And Israel prosecutes and arrested at least 8,000 children since 2000. And usually prosecutes between 500 and 700 children annually. Um, and they're in military courts, by the way, and not a single Israeli child has ever been tried in a military court. So this is pretty horrific. Another article by Defense of Children International. They're an NGO, and there's a group in Palestine. They talk about violence by settler violence against Palestinian children. There have been 73, the article says there's 73 settler attacks against Palestinian children since 2015. And no one is ever held accountable about the settler attacks and the IDF attacks. No one is ever held accountable. No one is ever charged. They're like the U.S. police. Article in Left Voice recently said that 2,000 people a year are killed by the police. No one, very, very 99.9% of the people, no one is go free. No police go free. No one is ever charged with anything. They have total impunity. That's how the system works. And we also know there are close ties between the IDF and the U.S. police. There's training techniques. The U.S. police, big city police, trained in Israel. The chokehold, which killed George Floyd, the IDF uses that, as is well known. So there are close ties with U.S. imperialism. It's one of many. And the Defense for Children article said for 2021, we're only a few months into this year, that this happened before the current, before the situation May, June, said we're only a few months into the year and already there were 4 settler attacks against Palestinian children. This includes a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old, and an 8-year-old, like really young children. And finally, really blood-curdling this video, and I'll share the video by C.J. Whirlman. I don't know much about him. I believe he's either Australian, probably Australian, or from the UK. He has a YouTube channel. His videos document or account atrocities and brutalities against Muslim people in different parts of the world. He seems reliable. I don't know much about him, but he seems very reliable. There's some really hair-raising, horrific statistics here. He says 40% of all Palestinian children who are detained by the IDF are sexually abused, essentially raped. And that happens anywhere, like children are in some form of captivity. It happens with ICE in the U.S. Trump's famous policy of separating children at the border. A huge number of those children were sexually abused. It goes without saying. Happens anywhere children are in captivity. I suspect a huge number of those children were either trafficked or farmed out to like evangelical Christian adoption agencies. I suspect that's going on. I can't prove anything, but so the stuff goes on. So anyway, 40% of all Palestinian children have been documented as being sexually abused by the IDF. And 100% of these children have been tortured. He goes on to say, most of these children, he says they're targeted by the F, by the IDF. They photograph someone, they find someone. They're often snatched in midnight raids from their house, from their home. They're pulled out. They're blindfolded. I mean, it's already terrifying right there. They're pulled out of their family's house in the middle of the night. It's very common practice. They're brought to an undisclosed location, sometimes held without any contact with their family or a lawyer, held for days or weeks or a very long time. Sometimes they deny them food or water. They're held in solitary confinement, which all this is a form of torture, and the object is to extract a confession from them. Basically, extract a confession from. J. Whirlman says that in a 5 month period, 640 Palestinian children were raped, sexually abused, and tortured within a 5 month period, which equates to 45 Palestinian children being sexually abused and tortured every month, and 1.5 children. This happens to every day. And he says this is just in Jerusalem, doesn't count atrocities in the West Bank and elsewhere. As many of these kids are apprehended in terrifying midnight raids. And this practice has been condemned by the UN in a UN statement. Said the UN condemns the repeated practice of detention and torture of Palestinian children and the consistent failure of the Israeli government to put a stop to this practice. And really horrible. And he goes on to say it's been going on for the past 70 years. Why does this happen? C.J. Whirlman gives a few. There's basically it's used funding to foster a narrative. Children are really tortured to extract confession, foster their narrative that the horrible Palestinians won't let us live in peace, and the children are so indoctrinated. That's one thing they want. Also, just sheer revenge and brutality. I think it's psychologically wants to emasculate so to speak, the Palestinian people to keep them demoralized and depressed. And there's evidence, can't really prove it. I don't have time to do a really intense video, but there's kind of evidence that this is accelerated. In recent weeks, I've been hearing story after story that seems to have accelerated, or at least evidence has been getting out more and more videos. And it's very hard for the mainstream U.S. corporate media to continue the narrative. There have been breaks in the narrative. The media is a little bit more honest about what's been going on. Okay, well, not a happy topic here, and I don't. I think the situation will have to end. I don't know how the situation will end. Well, it will end by a major worldwide international movement against U.S. imperialism. Israel is an extension of U.S. imperialism. They couldn't do any of this stuff without massive U.S. military, financial, and political support. And Biden recently gave another $1 billion to Israel to replenish their Iron Dome anti-missile system, protection system. So the U.S. has massive support of Israel, has had for many decades. So the way out is a massive movement against U.S. imperialism, uncompromising movement. U.S. imperialism is the most destructive force in the planet. Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed my video, and thank you.